How you going, guys? Campbell here from Autodidactic Channel. Hope you're having a fabulous day. And as always, autodidactic means to be self-educated. And in these times, we need to be self-educated because, as we know, history is actually his story. And we are being fed a script. And they are hiding our past from us. So that's what we do here. We look into the past and we try and figure out what actually went on by putting the facts against the mainstream narrative. So today I wanted to get into a bit about orphan children and Ireland in the 1800s and a few other bits and pieces. So let's jump into it. And this is Wikipedia, Magdalene Laundries in Ireland. The Magdalene Laundries in Ireland, also known as the Magdalene Asylums, were institutions usually run by the Roman Catholic orders, which operated from the 18th to the late 20th centuries. They were run ostensibly to house fallen women, an estimated 30,000 of whom were confined in these institutions in Ireland. In 1993, a mass grave containing 155 corpses was uncovered in the convent grounds of one of the laundries. Laundries? I think they were actually workhouses where they were washing clothes as well. But yeah, laundries. This led to media revelations about the operations of the secretive institutions. A formal state apology was issued. Well, there you go. That makes up for everything. A compensation scheme for survivors was set up by the Irish government, but by that time, obviously, there wouldn't have been many survivors. The Dublin Magdalene Asylum, and now it says sometimes called the Magdalene Asylum for Penitent Females. Penitent. Sounds like penitentiary, which is a jail. On Lower Leeson Street was the first such institution in Ireland. It was a Church of Ireland-run institution and accepted only Protestant women. It was founded in 1765 by Lady Arabella Denny. Ireland's Catholic-run Magdalene Asylums survived the longest. Ireland's Magdalene Laundries were quietly supported by the state and operated by religious communities for more than 200 years. On laundries, James Smith asserts that the Irish variety took on a distinct character. Inmates were required to work primarily in laundries, since the facilities were self-supporting. Andrea Parrott and Nina Cummings wrote, "The cost of violence, oppression and brutalization of women is enormous, and in their struggle to survive, the inmates suffered not only physically but spiritually and emotionally." So there you go, they suffered physically, spiritually and emotionally. And who was it run by? The state and the Catholic Church. There we go. Fallen women. In the late 18th century, the term fallen women primarily referred to prostitutes, but by the end of the 19th century, Magdalene Laundries were filled with many different kinds of women, including girls who were not prostitutes at all, but either seduced women or women who had yet to engage in sexual activity. Okay. According to Francis Finnegan, author of Do Penance or Perish, a study of Magdalene Asylum in Ireland, missionaries were required to approach prostitutes and distribute religious tracts designed to be read in sober moments and divert women from their vicious lives. So there you go. I mean, you can read the rest of that yourself. Number of inmates, lots, mass grave, reparations. So it's the same old story. We get this, all around the world. It's all coming out that there were all of these different types of institutions that were just incarcerating you know, women and children and men, basically everyone. There was workhouses in England, no doubt they were everywhere as well, and they were basically the forerunners to schools. So I'll get into that as well. But this is what was going on in the 1800s, and we know this, right? We've always, you know, kind of joked about, you know, the biggest building in these old world towns is always the insane asylum. And just so you can see, this is just a search. DuckDuckGo, Ireland 1800s orphans. We've got here, History Ireland, talks about many Irish famine orphans, the Magdalene Laundries, Wikipedia, Irish famine orphan, orphans of Irish workhouses, an Irish Catholic orphanage hid the bodies of 800 children. Do you have an Irish famine orphan? Dublin orphans and destitute children. 796 Irish orphans buried in mass grave. Yeah, so this is something that was going on. They were basically, I mean, I don't know what was happening. These looked like they were the orphan children, you know, the orphans, but they were still, I don't know, what were they doing? Just culling the ones that wouldn't comply, maybe? I don't know, but this is just Ireland, and this was going on all over the world. And this is called Irish Famine Orphan. Anne Murphy was born in County of Meath, Ireland, around 1833. Surviving the Great Famine, Anne migrated to Australia in 1850. Later telling the Sydney Benevolent Asylum, she arrived per the John Knox. Anne was apparently one of a shipload of young female orphans, arriving in Sydney on the 29th of April, 1850. But I have been unable to identify her on the list of immigrants aboard the John Knox. The orphans were taken off ship to Hyde Park Barracks, from whence they went into employment, mostly as house servants. Between 1848 and 1850, over 4,000 adolescent female orphans emigrated from Irish workhouses to Sydney, Melbourne and Adelaide on the other side of the world. Their emigration has become known as the Earl Grey scheme, after its principal architect, Earl Grey. So there you go, he wasn't just making tea. Secretary of State for the Colonies in Lord John Russell's Whig government at the time of the Great Irish Famine, they came from among the genuinely destitute class in Irish society, those whose world had been torn apart by the tragedy of the Great Irish Famine. Inmates of recently constructed workhouses orphaned by the famine, though about a quarter of them had one parent still alive, so they weren't orphans, all of them. Most were between 14 and 20 years of age. Wow. So they weren't young either, and willing to grasp opportunity of a new life in the antipodes. So there you go, they gave it away to come out to Australia on their own accord to be servants, or so the story says. But isn't that interesting? Boatloads of orphans sent to Australia in 1850. And I'm guessing that's probably not the first boatload. So again, something that needs a bit more looking into. But I'll leave you this link. And it talks a lot about this. Anne Murphy. Anne was again left to fend for herself and her family when her husband was readmitted in June and then died. Oh my gosh, she didn't have a good time. Oh my gosh. What happened to Anne? This is, okay. With her husband in Tarpon Creek and being heavily pregnant, Anne was forced to have her two eldest children, Sarah and Joseph, also recorded as Stephen Joseph, admitted to the Randwick Asylum for Destitute Children. So they took their kids off her in 1858. So they were both less than 8 years old. The reason stated in the admission book was father in Tarpon Creek. Mother resides in Sydney, is unable to maintain her children. New South Wales Records offers blah blah blah. The asylum normally admitted children aged between the ages of 3 and 10 years old, every child admitted, including voluntary admissions, was to remain the responsibility of the institution until age 19, or in the case of a female, marrying earlier until her marriage. The Randwick site included a farm, where the boys learnt farming skills. There you go. A month later, June 15, 1858, while her husband was still in Tarpon Creek, Anne was admitted to the Sydney Benevolent Asylum, where near Central Railway. The name on admissions was spelled Holdenton, blah blah blah. Anne could not read or write and gave her age as 24 as she arrived. Anne's third child was born 1858, and both mother and baby were discharged from the Benevolent Asylum. And it goes on down here, and her husband dies, and she has a really bad time. Just in and out of these asylums. She loses her kids to the government, and it's probably a pretty common story. And yeah, I'll let you read it all down there. There's lots of it. So I'm sure we've all heard about the Irish Famine, but let's just have a bit of a look-see, refresh ourselves, build those myelin sheaths. In the early 1800s, the impoverished and rapidly growing rural population of Ireland had become almost totally dependent on one crop. Only the potato could produce enough food to sustain families, farming the tiny plots of land the Irish peasants had been forced onto by British landlords. The lowly potato was an agricultural marvel, but staking the lives of an entire population on it was enormously risky. Sporadic potato crop failures had plagued Ireland in the 1700s and early 1800s. A blight caused by a fungus struck potato plants across all of Ireland. The failure of essentially the entire potato crop for several years led to unprecedented disaster. Both Ireland and America would be changed forever. So it was in the 1840s, also known as the Great Hunger. Basically, yeah, all the crops failed because of a fungus. In 1841, Ireland's population was more than 8 million. It had been estimated that at least 1 million died of starvation and disease in the late 1840s, and at least another 1 million immigrated during the famine, or were orphans forced onto boats. The famine hardened resentment toward the British who ruled Ireland. Nationalist movements in Ireland, which had always ended in failure, would now have a powerful new component: sympathetic Irish immigrants living in America. Oh, so there we go. So botanical causes, blah, blah, blah. So there you go. Basically, it goes down and it tells you it really destroyed the social structure of Ireland, killed 1 million people, 1 million people left. So that was basically a quarter of the population was gone. And a lot of them went to America, and the rest were basically sent to Australia. And then, wouldn't you know it, all Irish genealogical records were destroyed in the 1922 fire. Myth or fact? And it comes down here. It says there was a fire, basically the Irish Civil War, on the 30th of June 1922, when after a 2-day bombardment, an explosion and fire ravaged the building, as well as destroying many irreplaceable genealogical records in the Public Records Office. The interior of the forecourts was seriously damaged and the central dome collapsed. There you go. So, yeah, they're saying that all their records, all their genealogy was taken out and it was lost. And if you don't know the story of Ireland, Ireland, you know, obviously we have Northern Ireland, and then we have Ireland. It is, of course, an island, and the British basically are ruling Northern Ireland. The rest is self-ruled, but it's really, really dominated by, you know, the different economies. You know, other countries really, really play with Ireland and keep it down. And the thing about Ireland is it has a very, very long history. If you haven't looked into it, check out Michael Tsarion. I'll see if I can find something and leave a link. And also Mind Unveiled has done a lot on Ireland. And the story goes that basically after Atlantis fell, many of the survivors made it to Ireland and tried to restart society. Then they spread out, and these were basically like the Druids and people like this. But there's a lot of evidence that they sort of went to Egypt and influenced that, and influenced a lot of culture. But then they were sort of wiped from history, a lot like Tartaria. So that's something else. This topic is so deep, but that's something else I'll have to touch on as well at some point. And in World War II, the bombing of Dublin. And of course, we know that wars are all created. They're created, of course, to make money, but they're also created to wipe out history. Or should I say, our story. The first bombing of neutral Republic of Ireland. See, this is the thing. In World War II, they wanted to be neutral and stay out of it, but they got bombarded. During World War II took place 26 August 1940 when the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, dropped bombs at Campile County, Wexford, killing 3 people. First bombing of the city, Dublin, occurred on the early morning, 1941. Basically, so they dropped bombs. At the beginning of the Second World War, Ireland declared its neutrality and proclaimed the emergency. By July 1940, Britain stood alone with her Commonwealth and Empire against Germany. By May 1941, the German Air Force had bombed numerous British cities, including Belfast in Northern Ireland. In the Blitz, Northern Ireland, as part of the United Kingdom, was at war, but the independent state of Ireland was neutral. German area bombings armed in the direction of the British Isles were reduced after the launch of Operation Barbarossa. So there you go, it was neutral, but obviously Northern Ireland was part of England. So it was in the war, and it got some old world buildings taken out. So yeah, there you go. And I just thought we'd finish by having a look at some of the old world buildings in Dublin, because of course these buildings are everywhere. So enjoy, guys. Thanks for watching and spending some time with me. Thank you for everyone who supports this channel in whatever way you can, by liking, sharing. Definitely please share this content out, because I'm heavily shadow banned by YouTube. And also, if you hit the bell, you'll be notified of all upcoming videos. And thank you to everyone who supports me through PayPal, Patreon, and my merch store. And if you would like to help out, there are links below in the description. So guys, stay awesome, because you are. And I'll talk to you all soon. Bye for now.